You never expect the end of your marriage to happen under strobe lights. But for me, it did. Downtown Austin, a Friday night, bass thumping like a second heartbeat. The place smelled like cologne, alcohol, and sweat, and the air was thick with people shouting over each other, clinking glasses, dancing like they didn't have to wake up for anything tomorrow. And somewhere in all of that chaos, that ordinary celebratory chaos, my world came undone. The company conference had just wrapped up that afternoon. 3 grueling days of panels, team building, awkward coffee chats with middle management, and slide decks with buzzwords like synergy and scalability. Our department, HR, sales, marketing, legal, decided to go out to unwind. Brooke was already there with them, my wife of nearly 9 years. She had left a bit earlier with the group while I stayed behind for a last-minute client call that ran long. It wasn't anything serious, just business. I remember driving there thinking about how I was looking forward to seeing her, maybe dancing a little, maybe getting a drink together like we used to when we were younger and things were simpler. I even texted her on the way, "On my way, save me a dance?" She never replied, didn't even leave me on read. I brushed it off. Maybe she couldn't hear her phone over the noise. Maybe she was just having fun. I wasn't the type to get clingy about stuff like that. I parked a couple of blocks away and walked to the club. I remember passing a group of college kids on the sidewalk, laughing, yelling at each other, taking selfies. I felt old. 38, in a button-down shirt, walking alone into a place where half the crowd probably wasn't old enough to remember MySpace. I almost turned back, almost texted her that I was going to pass and just meet her at home. I wish I had. When I stepped into the club, the lights hit me first, flashing blue and red, like a disco crime scene. Then the music, loud enough that I could feel the floor vibrating through my shoes. I pushed through a couple making out by the entrance and scanned the crowd for our team. Took a minute, but I spotted familiar faces near the VIP section in the back. A cluster of people in office casual clothes pretending they knew how to party. And then I saw her. Brooke. She looked good. Really good. Hair up in that soft twist she always wore when she wanted to feel confident. Dressed tighter than usual. Black, strapless. Something she hadn't worn in years. She laughed at something and tilted her head back, her hand resting lightly on someone's shoulder. That someone was Zach. And that's when the room went quiet for me. Zach, my college best friend. The guy who used to crash on our couch when he was in town. The guy who helped me move into our first apartment. The guy who gave the best man speech at our wedding. What the hell was he doing here? At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Maybe he ran into Brooke downtown and stopped by. Maybe she texted him. But then I saw it. I saw her touch his chest like she used to touch mine. I saw the way he leaned into her, brushing something from her collarbone. Slow, mate, possessive. They were laughing. She said something and he leaned in. Their foreheads touched. And then, like a slap to the face, their lips did too. Not a mistake. Not a brush. Not one of those weird hello cheek kisses. It was a kiss. I stopped walking. I just stood there like a ghost while the rest of the club pulsed around me. People danced. Lights flashed. Glasses clinked. But all I could see was her. Them. That kiss didn't last long. Maybe 2-3 seconds max. But that was enough. Enough to undo 9 years of history. Enough to set my heart on fire in the worst way. I pushed through the crowd, my hands shaking. My mind was scrambling for some explanation. Maybe I misread it. Maybe they were just drunk. Maybe I was seeing things. I stepped up right behind them and said her name. Brooke. She turned around slowly, like she hadn't heard me at first. And when she saw me, she didn't even flinch. Didn't panic. Didn't look like she was caught doing something she shouldn't have been doing. She blinked once. Gave me a calm, almost rehearsed expression. Like I was the one interrupting. Jason, she said, her voice flat but not unkind. You made it. I didn't know what to say. I think my mouth opened but no words came out. My heart was pounding, but I felt cold. Then she said it, and it's burned into my memory like a scar. You misunderstood. I slipped and he helped me up. It looked weird, but you know Zach, he's always overly dramatic. She laughed. Actually laughed. And then, the real gut punch. You're being paranoid again. Again. As if this was a pattern with me. As if she was used to me jumping to wild conclusions. As if I was the problem. Zach just stood there, saying nothing. He didn't meet my eyes. Coward. I looked at him, then back at her. She had already turned back toward the others like nothing happened. I felt like I just walked into the wrong version of my own life. Some alternate timeline where everything familiar was twisted just slightly out of shape. The lights flashed again. The music swelled. Someone knocked into me and mumbled a half-hearted apology, but I barely noticed. I stood there in the middle of a nightclub full of strangers, trying to hold myself together while the woman I loved gaslit me to my face. That kiss wasn't an accident. I know what I saw, but she was already rewriting the story and daring me to argue. I didn't. Not yet. I turned around and walked back through the club, bumping shoulders, ignoring the heat in my chest and the sting behind my eyes. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't check it. I didn't want to see some excuse, some manipulation. Not then. I hit the sidewalk and kept walking, one foot in front of the other, all the way to my car. When I got in, I didn't drive right away. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel like it could anchor me to something real. Something that wasn't a lie. Something that hadn't just collapsed under me like a floor with rotten beams. And that's when I realized something. That kiss, that moment, wasn't the beginning of her betrayal. It was the reveal. The mask had just fallen off. The drive home from the club felt longer than it should have. The roads were nearly empty. The city washed in the amber glow of streetlights. But inside my car, it was just silence and static. My hands were locked on the wheel. My jaw clenched so tight it ached. I couldn't stop replaying it. The way her hand rested on Zach's chest, the easy laugh, the kiss, the lie. You're being paranoid again. That line echoed in my head like a taunt. Again? When had I ever been paranoid about her before? Brooke was the grounded one in the relationship, the rational one. The one who planned our vacations a year in advance, who color-coded the budget spreadsheet and reminded me to drink more water. And me? I trusted her so completely I never questioned where she was or who she was with. But as I sat there at a red light with the bass of some distant car rattling the air, something shifted in my head, like a gear clicking into place. Things that once seemed like nothing, minor quirks, little inconsistencies, were suddenly glowing like warning signs I'd missed. I thought back to the past few months. At the time, I chalked it all up to stress. We were both busy, the company had been going through restructuring, and Brooke had taken on extra projects in HR. She used to be home by 6:30 at the latest. Lately, it was often past 9, and when she did come home, she barely spoke. Just threw her purse on the table, claimed she was exhausted, and disappeared into the bathroom or the guest room. I'd even asked her once, just offhandedly, "Hey, are you sure everything's okay at work? You've been pulling a lot of late nights." She smiled, but it was forced. "I told you we're onboarding the new team. I'm fine." But now that I was sitting with that memory, something felt off. Brooke had always hated staying late. She was the one who used to tell me, "No one remembers you stayed late. They remember you missed dinner." And yet, for the past 3 months, she'd missed almost all of them. Then there was the phone thing. I used to joke that Brooke was the last person on earth who didn't care about her phone. She'd leave it lying around, face up, no password for years. But lately it was glued to her. She started locking it. "Work requires it now," she said. Even brought it into the shower, which made no sense because she used to say the steam would ruin it. I remember one Saturday morning, she got a message while we were having breakfast. The screen lit up, and she practically dove across the table to flip it over. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just a spam text. Forgot to put it on silent." Another time, I walked into the bedroom and saw her switch from one app to another so fast it looked like muscle memory. She smiled like nothing happened and asked if I wanted tea. I let it go, because that's what you do when you trust someone. Now I wish I hadn't. There were more little things, too, individually meaningless, but when I started lining them up like dominoes, the pattern was impossible to ignore. The baseball cap. That was about a month ago. I got into her car, we both kept keys to each other's vehicles, and there was a men's cap in the back seat. Not mine. Not a brand I'd ever worn. I assumed it belonged to one of her co-workers. Maybe someone she gave a ride to? I asked her about it later, casually. "Oh, that?" she said, not even looking up from her laptop. "That's Sarah's boyfriend's. I dropped them off after yoga last weekend. Forgot to give it back." I believed her. Why wouldn't I? But now I remembered something else. Sarah had moved to Denver. 2 months ago. I was at her going-away brunch. Then there was the time I woke up around 2 a.m. and found the balcony door slightly open. I thought maybe I'd forgotten to lock it, but as I got closer, I heard a voice. Quiet, hushed. Brooke was out there, sitting on the patio chair in her robe, speaking softly into her phone. When I stepped outside, she ended the call so fast it was like she'd been electrocuted. "Everything okay?" I asked. She nodded. "Yeah, just an old friend from L.A. going through some stuff." "Anyone I know?" "No, you wouldn't." She kissed my cheek and said, "Go back to sleep." And I did. God, I did. Now I saw it differently. Every casual dismissal, every "you're overthinking," every smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It was all part of the same playbook. Not confrontational, not explosive, just soft gaslighting, like water eroding a rock, slowly convincing me that nothing was wrong, that I was imagining things. Even our last road trip made more sense now. It was supposed to be a weekend to reconnect, a short drive to the hill country, a cabin with no Wi-Fi, wine, books, silence. But she was checked out the entire time. Didn't want to play cards like we used to, barely touched her dinner. Spent hours in the bedroom reading something on her tablet with the screen turned away from me. I thought she was just tired. She wasn't tired. She was already gone. That whole weekend, she only really smiled when she was texting. I remember asking, "Who are you talking to so much?" And she said, "Nobody, just catching up with a friend from work." I didn't ask again, because I didn't want to look paranoid, because she trained me not to. And the thing that cut the deepest? Zach, who used to call me brother, and meant it. We'd been through it all, college heartbreaks, internships, breakups, job hunts, even the time I dislocated my shoulder in that awful ski trip and he drove me 3 hours to a hospital while cracking jokes the whole way. He was the one who helped me pick out the ring. He gave the toast at our wedding, told Brooke she was the best thing that ever happened to me, and I believed it. We lost touch for a few years after he moved out west, but he always sent birthday texts. We'd grab a drink if he was in town. It never felt like we drifted, not really. 2 weeks ago, he messaged me out of the blue. "In Austin for a few days. Let's catch up?" I told him I was slammed with work, but maybe next time. He said, "No worries. Might crash a few panels at your conference. Maybe I'll see you there." And I said, "If you see Brooke before I do, tell her she owes me a drink." He just replied, "Haha, will do." Now that exchange felt like a setup, like a joke only he was in on. I thought I knew my wife. I thought I knew my best friend. Turns out they knew each other better than I knew either of them. I finally pulled into our driveway, engine idling. The porch light was still on, and I could see the living room through the blinds, soft, still, quiet, like nothing had changed. Like the house wasn't about to become the site of a funeral for the life I thought I had. I didn't go inside right away. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, watching our house, our perfect little suburban setup. 2 bikes leaned against the garage, her sandals by the front door, the welcome mat she picked out that said, "This is our happy place." I stared at that mat for a long time, and finally whispered, "Not anymore." The next day, I didn't go to work. I told myself I'd work from home, check emails, catch up on reports, be productive. But I didn't open my laptop once. I just sat there on the couch with a mug of cold coffee in my hand, staring at the bookshelf across from me like it held answers. Nothing did. Everything in the house felt different, haunted. Familiar objects now carried weight. The throw blanket she always curled up with on Sundays. The photo of us on the coast in Santa Barbara. The coffee table she insisted we get even though I said it was too expensive. At the time, I gave in because I thought compromise was love. Now it all just felt like evidence. Around noon, I made up my mind. I had to know. I couldn't keep walking in circles around this hole in my chest. I needed confirmation, not maybes, not memories twisted into doubt. I needed undeniable. So I drove home early the next day. I didn't text her. Didn't call. Didn't say I was skipping the afternoon staff meeting or the budget sync. I just got in my car after lunch and went home, hoping, dreading, that I'd find something, praying that I wouldn't. The house was quiet when I pulled into the driveway. Her car was parked in its usual spot. That was the first surprise. She'd said she had a full day of meetings, back to back. I sat in the car for a full minute before I stepped out. The air felt heavy, like before a storm. I don't even remember unlocking the door. My body was on autopilot, like my brain was trying to protect me from whatever was coming next. Inside, the living room was empty. Same with the kitchen. But there were signs. A wine glass on the counter, barely rinsed. One of the dining room chairs pulled back like someone had sat and left in a hurry. Her heels by the door. The ones she said gave her blisters, so she only wore them for big events. The house wasn't just lived in, it was freshly lived in. I moved quietly, every floorboard under my feet sounding like thunder. My heart was racing, my breath shallow. I approached the hallway leading to our bedroom, the one we used to share, the one that had grown colder over the past year, emotionally and literally. She always complained I kept the thermostat too low. I stopped just before the door. It was closed. We never closed our bedroom door during the day. Ever. I stood there, frozen, trying to convince myself that I was being irrational. That maybe she was napping, or folding laundry, or on a conference call and didn't want to be disturbed. Then I heard it. A muffled laugh, followed by a sound I'll never forget. The distinct metallic whisper of a zipper being undone. I didn't think. I didn't breathe. I threw the door open. It all happened in less than a second, but every detail burned itself into my mind with perfect clarity. She was by the bed, pulling her dress down, or up, I don't even know anymore. And her hair was a mess, tangled in a way that didn't come from wind or sleep. She looked like a stranger, a startled, guilty, beautiful stranger. The window to the balcony was wide open, and in it, I saw a man's silhouette. Zach. He was climbing out, fast and awkward, trying to disappear like some cartoon villain who just got caught red-handed. I didn't see his face, but I didn't have to. I'd recognize his shape anywhere. He was taller than me, slightly hunched, still somehow wearing the hoodie he always tied around his waist like he was still in college. My mouth was dry. My fists were clenched. But I didn't scream. She turned, saw me, and froze. She didn't cry. She didn't stammer. She just looked at me and said, in a voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it, "You weren't supposed to come back this early." That was it. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "This isn't what it looks like." Just that. A scheduling conflict. In that moment I didn't feel rage, or heartbreak, or even betrayal. I felt clarity. Everything made sense now. The late nights, the gaslighting, the distance, the baseball cap, the whispers on the balcony, the lies layered so delicately they felt like truths at the time. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't a kiss that looked weird. She had cheated. Not once. Not by accident. Not in the gray area of an emotional affair that meant nothing. This was real. This was physical. This was in our home. With Zach. I backed out of the room. She didn't follow me. I walked down the hall, back through the kitchen, out the front door. The sky was a strange shade of gray. Not quite cloudy. Not quite sunny. The neighborhood looked exactly the same as it always did. Kids riding scooters, sprinklers going off on timers, someone walking a golden retriever. Life didn't care what I'd just seen. I got in my car and drove. No destination. Just away. I don't even remember the first hour. I think I ended up on the freeway heading west, toward the hill country. I passed exits I didn't recognize. I drove until the sun started to dip and the sky went pink and gold. the kind of sunset Brooke used to love. I kept driving. Eventually, I pulled into a rundown motel off the side of a quiet highway, one of those places with a buzzing neon sign that said vacancy in half-lit letters. The guy at the front desk didn't even ask questions. I paid in cash. Room 17. The key was one of those old plastic cards that never work on the first try. The room smelled like old carpet and desperation. There was a flickering lamp in the corner and a TV bolted to the dresser. I dropped my bag, sat on the edge of the stiff bed, and just exhaled. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe. There were no more lies to sort through. No more maybe I'm overthinking this debates. No pretending. No dissecting her texts for clues. No wondering if I was losing my mind. Now I knew. She cheated on me. With Zach. In our house. And she wasn't even sorry. I stared at the ceiling for hours. Not sleeping. Not thinking. Just being. The emotional shock was like Novocaine. Numb. Disorienting, almost peaceful in its own weird way. I didn't cry. Not then. Not yet. There'd be time for that later. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, I realized something. This wasn't the worst moment of my life. It was the end of a lie. And maybe, in some twisted way, it was the start of something else, not freedom exactly, but the possibility of it. The raw, terrifying beginning of becoming someone new. I didn't know who that person would be, but I knew who I wasn't anymore. I wasn't the husband who ignored red flags. I wasn't the friend who trusted blindly. And I wasn't going back. Not to that house. Not to that woman. Not to the version of myself who thought love could survive anything, even betrayal. Because it couldn't. I woke up the next morning in a stiff motel bed with no memory of falling asleep. My head throbbed. Not from alcohol, because I hadn't had a drop, but from the weight of everything I'd seen, everything I'd realized. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. The dingy yellow walls, the scratchy blanket, the buzzing HVAC unit in the window, none of it felt real. But then it hit me. The kiss, the laugh, the zipper, Zach's silhouette slipping through the balcony. And her words, "You weren't supposed to come back this early." I sat up slowly, my body aching like I'd been hit by something invisible. Maybe I had grief, betrayal, disillusionment. They don't leave bruises, but they sure as hell take the wind out of you. The air in the room was stale. I walked over to the window, pulled back the curtain. The view wasn't much, just the side of another building and a sliver of sky. Still, it felt more honest than anything I'd looked at in weeks. Honest in its ugliness. I checked my phone. 12 missed calls. 8 voicemails. All from Brooke. No texts, interestingly. Just calls. Maybe she didn't want anything written down. Maybe she didn't know what to say. Or maybe, just maybe, she was still hoping she could spin it into something that made me look crazy. I didn't listen to any of the messages. I deleted them. Felt good. Not angry. Just clean. I showered. Threw on yesterday's clothes. Went down to the front desk and paid for another night. The guy looked up from his crossword long enough to nod, then went back to circling words like deceit and exit. It was only noon, but I wasn't ready to go anywhere. I didn't want to see anyone. I didn't want sympathy, or advice, or anyone telling me what I should do next. I just wanted stillness. I needed to be somewhere that didn't ask anything of me. Somewhere I didn't have to pretend I was okay, or rational, or even civil. So I stayed. I turned off my phone completely. Not silent. Not airplane mode. Off. For the first time in, I don't know, years? I couldn't be reached. And that realization was like cracking open a window in a smoke-filled room. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The plaster was cracked, spider-webbed from the center like an old wound that had never been fixed properly. I traced it with my eyes, over and over, letting my mind go blank. And slowly, something unexpected settled in. Relief. Not happiness. Not peace. Just the beginning of space. The start of separation. From her, from Zach, from the life I thought I had to keep living. I didn't know what came next. I didn't have a plan. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't holding my breath. I left the motel that evening to grab some food. There was a diner about a mile down the road. glowing like a firefly in the dark. The kind of place with booths that stuck to your legs and a waitress who called everyone Han. I sat by the window and ordered a burger and fries. The waitress, Shirley, according to her name tag, refilled my coffee without asking. She must have seen the look on my face, because she didn't ask any questions. Just gave me that quiet kindness people who've lived long, hard lives seem to know how to give. Across the diner, an older couple sat holding hands. No phones. No distractions. Just two people sharing a slice of pie and a quiet conversation. I should have felt bitterness, envy, but I didn't. I felt distance, like I was watching something from another life, a life I'd convinced myself I was living but never really had. Because the truth is, Brooke and I hadn't held hands in months. I used to reach for her during movies, or when we'd walk into a restaurant, and she'd always find some way to avoid it. Pretending to dig through her purse, adjusting her sleeve, brushing hair out of her face. I'd stopped trying eventually, told myself we were just past that phase. But looking at that couple now, I realized love doesn't have phases. It has choices. You choose to reach for the other person or you choose to pull away. She had been pulling away for a long time. I just hadn't wanted to see it. After dinner, I drove around aimlessly. No GPS. No destination. I ended up at a lake I didn't even know the name of. Just parked and sat by the shore while the water lapped quietly against the rocks. I thought about my life. Not the life with Brooke, but my life. What was left of it. And I realized something. I'd built everything around her. Not in a codependent way. I still had my own job, my own friends, my own goals, but emotionally, she was the anchor. And now that anchor was gone and I was floating. But maybe floating wasn't the worst thing. Maybe drifting was how you found a new current. I went back to the motel and slept better that night. Not great, but better. No dreams. No nightmares. Just blank, black sleep. The next morning I woke up early. Got coffee from a gas station and drove 2 towns over to buy clean clothes from a Walmart. Nothing fancy, just a few shirts, a hoodie, some jeans. I didn't want to go back to the house yet. The idea of walking into that bedroom again made my stomach twist. But I knew I couldn't stay hidden forever. So I made a decision. I drove to a storage facility near the edge of the city and rented a small unit. Month to month. The guy behind the counter asked if I was moving. I just said, starting over. He didn't press. I went back home mid-afternoon. She wasn't there. Good. The place smelled like her shampoo. The living room had 2 mugs on the coffee table, but only one had lipstick on the rim. I didn't want to think about who the other one belonged to. I went straight to the bedroom, packed a duffel bag, clothes, toiletries, the old photo album my mom made me when I graduated college. That was it. I didn't touch the wedding photos. I didn't touch anything that was ours. I was done with ours. I didn't leave a note. I didn't owe her one. She knew what she'd done. And I was done cleaning up the mess. I dropped the bag off at the storage unit and booked an Airbnb for a week. Small studio apartment above a garage in a quiet neighborhood. The host was an older woman named Carla who baked muffins and left them by the door. She reminded me of my aunt. I didn't tell anyone where I was. Not yet. I wasn't ready for the questions or the pity or the offers to crash on a couch. I just wanted to sit in this in-between space a little longer. Let the dust settle. Took 3 days before I turned my phone back on. The notifications hit like a wave. 38 missed calls. 17 voicemails. More texts than I cared to scroll through. The last one said, "Please just talk to me. There's more you don't know. Please. I can explain everything." I stared at the screen for a long time. And then, for reasons I still don't fully understand, I opened her most recent voicemail. She sounded tired. Not panicked. Not angry. Just defeated. Her voice cracked as she said, "Jason, I'm sorry. I know I don't deserve a response, but I need to tell you the truth. All of it. I didn't just hurt you. Zach, he was seeing someone else too. Someone close to you. Someone you trust. You're not the only one he lied to." I sat up straight. "What I did was wrong," she continued. "But Zach, he's not who you think he is. He wasn't just with me. He was with Chris's wife too." Click. The message ended. And just like that, everything I thought I understood cracked open again. Chris, my business partner, my co-founder, the guy I'd built my company with from scratch. We started in my garage with 2 laptops and a folding table. We'd been through more late nights and client disasters than I could count. He was my second family. We talked each other through layoffs, burnouts, existential crises. His wife, Rachel, was the kind of person who brought cookies to the office unprompted, who asked about my mom every time she called, who sent a sympathy card when my uncle passed away. Zach had been with her, too. Suddenly, the betrayal wasn't just personal. It was wider, deeper. Zach hadn't just nuked my marriage. He was carving a path of destruction through every corner of my life. I didn't know what to do with that. Not yet. But I knew one thing. I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. I stared at my phone long after Brooke's voicemail ended. Her words echoed in my mind like a dropped glass rolling across the floor, loud even in their quietness. Zach was with Chris's wife too. That sentence shouldn't have surprised me. Not after everything. Not after seeing Zach sneak out of my bedroom like some spineless thief. Not after Brooke lied to my face. Not just once, but repeatedly, until her stories were wrapped in so many half-truths I didn't know what was real anymore. But somehow, this new piece of the puzzle hit different. Chris, the one guy I would have trusted with anything, the guy who had trusted me. The guy I'd started a business with in our 20s, working out of his living room until we could afford an office. We'd sat shoulder to shoulder building client decks, taking calls at midnight, pitching investors together while still wearing mismatched socks and 2-day-old stubble. Chris wasn't just a colleague. He was my person. The kind of friend who doesn't flinch when your world falls apart. The kind of friend you call when your dad's in the hospital or your car won't start in the middle of nowhere. He was there when Brooke and I bought our first house. He helped me move our entire living room in 90-degree heat without complaint, just a 6-pack and a grin. And Rachel, his wife, was cut from the same cloth. Kind, funny, the type of woman who remembered birthdays and made you a plate to take home after dinner. She and Brooke used to hang out. Wine nights, yoga classes. We'd double date at that Thai place downtown and laugh until they closed. The thought of Zach touching her too made me sick. It wasn't just about me anymore. Zach hadn't just betrayed me. He'd infected everything. He was a parasite who sank his teeth into every corner of my life, and now it was bleeding from places I hadn't even looked yet. I sat on the edge of the bed in the Airbnb, my elbows on my knees, staring at the floor. The silence felt suffocating. I opened the window, hoping the cool evening air would help me think. But all I could think was, Chris has no idea. And that made me feel worse than anything Brooke had done. Because I remembered the day of the conference, when Chris leaned over during one of the panels and said, "Man, if I have to hear the word pivot one more time, I'm walking out." We laughed. It was easy then. I had no idea that within 48 hours, everything would feel radioactive. I paced the floor for a while, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to pretend I hadn't heard the voicemail, that it wasn't my place to get involved, that Chris's marriage wasn't my business. But it was, because I would have wanted him to tell me. If he knew about Brooke and Zach first, I'd want him to look me in the eye, not out of pity, but because we were supposed to be the kind of friends who told each other the truth. And besides, how could I work beside him every day knowing I was carrying that weight while he walked around in the dark? No, he needed to know. But I had to be smart about how. The next morning I texted him. "Hey, you free later? Need to talk. Face to face." It took about 5 minutes before the typing bubble popped up. "Chris, everything okay?" "Not really. I'll explain in person." "Usual cafe?" He agreed. No questions. That's the kind of guy Chris was. We met at our usual spot, a small cafe near the office with strong coffee and uneven tables. It was where we used to debrief after rough client meetings or celebrate after nailing a pitch. It had history, neutral ground. I got there first and ordered 2 black coffees. I didn't want food. Didn't think I could swallow anything with what I was about to say stuck in my throat like glass. Chris arrived a few minutes later, in his usual black zip-up and jeans. He looked tired, a little unshaven. like he hadn't been sleeping well. I wondered if he knew, or maybe just felt it. He sat down across from me, concern already etched into his face. "You all right?" he asked. I took a breath. "No," I said. "And after this, you probably won't be either." He frowned, leaning forward. "What's going on?" I didn't dance around it. Couldn't. "It's Zach," I said. "And Rachel." His face changed instantly, like I'd smacked him. "What about them?" "They've been seeing each other," I said slowly. "It's not just a rumor. I found out from Brooke. And before you ask, no, I didn't believe her at first. I thought maybe she was trying to deflect after what happened between her and Zach. But then I started digging. Chris didn't say anything. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the flash drive I'd prepared the night before. I slid it across the table. "What's this?" "Proof," I said. He stared at it for a moment. "Jesus, man. I recorded one of Zach's voicemails," I continued. "He didn't know I was on the line." He said, quote, "So what if she's married? Women like her come on their own." And he wasn't talking about Brooke. Chris just stared at the drive. His hands didn't move. His jaw clenched. I could see the shift, that internal earthquake when your mind tries to catch up to your heart. "You're sure?" he finally asked, his voice hoarse. "Yeah," I said. "I wish I wasn't, but yeah." He didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just sat there, staring at nothing. And then, after a long moment, he stood up. "Thanks for telling me," he said, his voice flat. "I'll be in touch." He walked out of the cafe without looking back. I sat there for a while, not sure whether I'd done the right thing or just lit a second fuse. The coffee had gone cold. I didn't care. The barista passed by with a refill pot, but I waved her off. A part of me wanted to follow Chris, to say something more, to soften the blow. But there was no softening this. There's no way to cushion betrayal. You can only rip the bandage off and let the wound breathe. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was a photo. A silver wedding ring sitting in a bathroom sink. Chris's. No caption. No explanation. Just finality. I stared at it for a long time. Then I put my phone down and closed my eyes. 2 friends. 2 families. One common denominator. Zach. That night, I walked through the neighborhood near the Airbnb. Just me and the cicadas. I ended up at a park and sat on a bench under a crooked street lamp, thinking about how much life had changed in a week. The pain was still there, sure. But underneath it, there was something else. Not hope. Not yet. But possibility. Maybe Chris and I weren't just 2 broken men. Maybe we were survivors. Maybe what Zach burned down could be rebuilt. Not the same, but stronger. And maybe, just maybe, this was the part of the story where things started getting better. Chris didn't show up at work for 3 days. When he finally walked in, he looked like he'd aged a decade. No words, no small talk. Just nodded at me like we were in on the same storm. That afternoon, he called a meeting and told the team he was taking a leave of absence for personal reasons. I knew what that meant. Rachel had moved out. The silence between them, like mine with Brooke, was now its own language. Later, Chris texted me. He took both our homes, but he doesn't get our future. We weren't just co-workers anymore. We were brothers in survival, 2 men forced to rebuild from the same wreckage, one betrayal at a time. Weeks passed. I moved into a new place. Small, quiet, mine. Brooke kept trying to reach me, but her messages grew weaker, like a song fading out. I never responded. She wasn't my story anymore. Chris and I still met for coffee. We talked less about what we'd lost and more about what came next. One night, he asked, "When are you going to start dating again?" I laughed. "When I stop enjoying being alone." And I meant it, because real freedom wasn't moving on to someone new. It was finally returning to yourself.